there should be a mute. And if you want to mute yourself till we get to the end of the meeting, I'd appreciate that. And one of the things we've talked about in our group is that we would like to have informational meetings that seem like they're important and things that people would be interested in. So I want to thank Renee so much for setting up this meeting because we want to keep you interested and informed. And we had such a huge group participation for the election with the letters and the calling, phone banking. And so we just want to make sure that we keep you fully engaged. We are going to have a chance for you to ask questions, and we're requesting, if you can, that you will put your questions in chat. And then we'll kind of look at the questions we have and consolidate, any duplicates and have questions at the end. One thing that to keep in mind is that this is not a public input session, so we can't do that. But the question should really evolve around the process and not opinions. So that would be helpful if you keep that in mind. Hopefully in about 45 minutes, we want to have a little meeting, if you have time, just to talk about the different actions, events, and activities that we have in place now. So, because we don't want you home alone and bored and without political involvement. So we're still pushing forward and trying to keep you all engaged. So I appreciate your participation. And so with that, I am going to have Renee introduce the commissioner, and I turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Isra Ahmad is currently a senior research and evaluation specialist with the Santa Clara County Division of Equity and Social Justice. And I can't think of a better position. Sounds like the best position there could be. So, she leads the intersectional research efforts across 7 offices. So these are the offices of women's policy, cultural competency, immigrant relations, labor standard enforcement, LGBTQ affairs, the 2020 census, and gender-based violence program. That's amazing. So, and in the past, she's been the lead for the Santa Clara County's tobacco control program. Let me get somebody in here. Oh, okay, all right, well, maybe Rhonda can add. Okay, Isra earned her bachelor's degree from San Jose State University and master's in public health in epidemiology, biostatistics from UC Berkeley. So I think she knew something already several years ago. That's amazing. And in her spare time, Isra enjoys baking all different kinds of cookies, actually. And so she'll always be welcome to our live events. And then she also enjoys hiking, especially the pinnacles, which some of us also enjoy. So it's really one of the best things to do. One additional thing that's amazing is she speaks several other languages, Hindi, Punjabi, and Urdu. But that's not what we'll be learning about today. That's for another day. But anyway, we want to thank Isra for joining us and sharing her really valuable information with us. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Renee, for that really warm introduction. I'm extremely excited to be here with you all to share about the current state of the redistricting process here in California. So I will go ahead and share my screen. Can you all see the screen?
Yeah.
Great. So just a brief reminder for everyone that in this session today will not be able to take any public input. And this is per California Government Code Section 8253. And so I will provide additional information at the end of this presentation where you can give your public input. And that would be at our website. So it's wedrawthelines.ca.org. So what is redistricting? Redistricting is the drawing and redrawing of new boundaries that determine which Californians are represented by each electoral district. And the commission is working really hard to try to make redistricting an appealing process, but it has been quite challenging. So we are very appreciative of all of the community efforts going on simultaneously to help us get the word out about this process. So why do we redistrict? Over time, communities change. So people are born, people die, people move, communities can shrink and grow, and areas where there were once roughly the same number of people become unequal over time. So redistricting will help balance out different communities to ensure there's that fair representation. One of the greatest powers that the people have is your voice. The people of California have the power to elect their own representatives to conduct the businesses of their government. How the district boundaries are configured can make a difference between empowering and maximizing the voters' voices or minimizing and muting those voices. In most states, politicians redraw districts and often end up drawing safe districts for themselves to stay in office. Redistricting historically has been used at times to exclude communities from political power. By fully participating in and monitoring the upcoming redistricting process, more communities may have the opportunity to elect candidates of their choice. So how does redistricting affect you? We thought it would be beneficial to highlight and break down how redistricting affects you directly. So here are 4 larger bucket areas in how redistricting affects you. This list is by no means exhaustive. These are just several examples. So for example, power to the people. The Voters' First Act was historic in California. It transferred the power of drawing district maps away from politicians and gave it to the people. Championing your issues. Having the opportunity to elect representatives that champion your issues is important in a state like California, where issues can vary drastically from one street to the next. Northern California might champion environmental or economic issues, while Central California might champion water and agricultural issues, and Southern California might champion issues dealing with transportation, housing, or employment. Variety of issues across California calls for a variety of elected officials to be able to represent those issues. Funding priorities. Tied to the issue of electing representatives that champion your issues, you might want to elect representatives that have your financial interest at heart. When it comes to building a budget, you will want a representative fighting to ensure your community gets the financial resources it deserves for various services such as education, water, and fire protection. Community boundaries. The redistricting process is all about drawing lines and determining which communities get grouped into which districts. Your input in the process is essential to help commissioners understand where your community starts and where your community ends. Redistricting in California is one of the few civic activities that any Californian can provide input in to regarding their community that ultimately impacts the law and regulations, tax structure, how funding is distributed, and which services are provided. The US Constitution requires that every American receives as close to equal representation as possible in government. As populations of districts change over time, it can leave some people overrepresented and others underrepresented in government. Redistricting evens out the population between districts. After the federal government publishes updated census data, California must redraw the boundaries of its congressional, state Senate, state assembly, and state board of equalization districts so that the districts correctly reflect the latest count of the state's population. Redistricting is based on the idea that each of our voices should be represented fairly by creating districts that have the same number of people. Census data results are used to draw new maps every 10 years to account for the ways that populations have changed and moved across the states and district. At the federal level, reapportionment takes place to reallocate US House seats among states. This too is done after each national census to ensure that seats are held by the states in a proportion to the size of their population. California currently has 53 House seats. That may change after we get the updated census numbers. Historically, legislators have drawn maps that allowed them to choose their constituents rather than enabling constituents to choose their representatives. This former system undermined the concept of fair representation, which is to give people the power to choose their representatives. So why does independent redistricting matter? We've talked about how redistricting affects you, and now we will explain why independent redistricting matters. Democracy depends on voters having the opportunity to choose their representatives. When elected officials redraw the lines of their own districts, they get to design their own territory and choose who their voters are. This slide highlights key terms in redistricting to help you understand why it's important to delegate the power of redistricting to the people. Gerrymandering happens when the election district boundaries are drawn in a way that gives a particular set of people, like a political party or racial group, or an unfair political advantage over another. This graph shows how in a jurisdiction with 50 people, 60% orange and 40% purple, that first chart, 5 districts can be drawn in multiple ways, but it's not always fair. The first 2 examples show 2 ways to draw district lines in a fair manner, where the districts are drawn to reflect the population proportionally. The 2 examples on the far right show how to draw district maps in a manner that does not reflect the population fairly, which is referred to as gerrymandering. This is why independent commissions like California's commission were created to remove the politics from the process and focus on the people. The commission must follow these 6 criteria in order when drawing district maps. These criteria are outlined in the Voters' Rights Act. The first criteria, districts must be of nearly equal population to comply with the US Constitution. Number 2, the Voting Rights Act. Districts must comply with the Voting Rights Act to ensure that minorities have a fair opportunity to elect representatives of their choice. Number 3, contiguity. Districts must be drawn contiguously so that all parts of the districts are connected to each other. Number 4, communities of interest. Districts must minimize the division of cities, counties, neighborhoods, and communities of interest to the extent possible. Number 5, districts should be geographically compact so that nearby areas of population are not bypassed for more distant populations. This requirement refers to density, not shape. Number 6, nesting districts. Where practicable, each Senate district should be comprised of 2 complete and adjacent assembly districts. Board of Equalization districts should be comprised of 10 complete and adjacent state Senate districts. In addition, the place of residence of any incumbent or political candidate may not be considered in the creation of a map, and districts may not be drawn for the purposes of favoring or discriminating against an incumbent political candidate or political party. There are several different redistricting efforts occurring currently and at the same time. And we are only one of many redistricting efforts occurring in California. We, the commission, are redrawing districts for state offices, while counties, cities, school districts, water districts, and community college districts are also redrawing their districts at the same time. We wanted to bring this to your attention because different efforts are happening simultaneously, and it can get confusing. Aside from being involved in the state redistricting process, the commission is also encouraging Californians to get involved in your local redistricting efforts as well. So let's take a look at the history of redistricting, particularly in California. In 2008, California voters passed Proposition 11, the Voters First Act. This act authorized the creation of an independent commission to draw new district lines for the state Senate, state assembly, and Board of Equalization. In 2010, Proposition 20, the Voters First Act for Congress, was added the responsibility of drawing congressional districts to the commission. Our goal as the commission is to spread the word that the people's role did not end with being counted in the census, and to collect valuable community input to assist us in the process of drawing new districts. The 2010 Redistricting Commission was California's first independent commission. The 2020 Redistricting Commission is building upon their work and will leave behind detailed documents to assist the 2030 Commission when they perform their duties. Other states with independent commissions include Arizona, Colorado, Idaho, Michigan, Montana, and Washington. So how were we selected? The commissioners all went through a very rigorous application process that attracted over 20,000 applicants in 2019. After an initial review, over 2,000 individuals completed a supplemental application. This supplemental application included letters of recommendation, responses to essay questions, disclosure of financial interests and donations, as well as some other criteria in order to determine eligibility, which include being registered with the same political party for the previous 5 years, as well as voting in 2 out of the 3 statewide elections prior to the application process. After a very thorough and public review, 120 applicants, so 40 Democrats, 40 Republicans, and 40 no party affiliates, or others, were invited to interview. From there, 60 applicants, so 20 Democrats, 20 Republicans, and 20 others, were chosen to be presented to the legislature. The California legislature was allowed to remove no more than 24 candidates, 8 from each political party pool, from consideration, leaving a total of 36 on the final qualified list. This act is written in our legislation, the Voters First Act, that the legislature has the authority to perform these strikes. The first 8 members, 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, and 2 others, were selected through a public drawing in July 2020. The final 6 members, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and 2 others, were then carefully selected by the first 8 commissioners in August 2020, taking several considerations into account to include political party, geography, race, gender, and expertise. And that resulted in the final commission. So here are your 14 commissioners. We hail from all parts of California. The commissioners are diverse in geography as they are in opinions and expertise. There are 7 from Northern California, 7 from Southern California, 8 who identify as women, 6 who identify as men. We range in age from the 30s to the 60s. There are NGO leaders, engineers, pastors, law enforcement officers, political scientists, public health experts, lawyers, and public servants. You are all welcome to join us at one of our commission meetings. They're currently held online due to COVID-19. We have all of the information listed out on how to access our meetings on our website, which is wedrawthelinesca.org. Our next meeting is actually tomorrow, starting at 1 p.m. So I welcome you all to join us. We've covered this a little bit, but just to go over it again, what are our duties as commissioners? Currently, we are holding community outreach and community outreach and information sessions. After the education sessions, the commission will hold public input meetings and accept community input and public testimony to assist in drawing the new electoral maps. We've used an example from Sacramento to demonstrate what the different maps look like for each district type. So although we are drawing 4 different maps, they will overlay, and folks are welcome to provide their input for all 4 or any of the 4 that you wish to provide input for. So how are we conducting this outreach? We have broken up the state into different outreach zones. And this is to make the outreach process a little bit more manageable. With approximately 40 million Californians, we wanted to touch as many people as possible in this process. So we've broken up the state into zones A through K. Here you can see that the different counties listed for each of the zones, as well as the commissioners who are leading the efforts in outreach in those zones. The commissioners are all dedicated to work across the zones when called upon to do so. So as you can see, I serve co-leading the outreach in Zone K, which is Imperial County and San Diego, as well as Zone H, which is Los Angeles County. However, I live and am from Zone C, which includes Santa Clara County. And I am excited to be here presenting to Santa Cruz County folks who, according to this map, are grouped in with Zone E, but you all are my neighbors. So I'm excited to be here. So communities of interest. When we're drawing our maps, we have to be mindful of communities of interest. We can obtain the city and county information from a variety of different respected and reputable sources. However, we need the communities of interest information directly from Californians. Communities of interest are defined as a concentrated population which shares common social and economic interests that should be included within a single district for the purpose of its effective and fair representation. Examples include areas in which the people share similar living standards or have similar cultures, use the same transportation facilities, have similar work opportunities, or have access to the same media. People can belong to multiple communities of interest as well. Keep in mind that a community of interest is not the same as a district, but communities of interest are a way and a key building block to create those districts. Some way to describe your community includes geographic, boundaries, so cities, towns, counties, school areas, and other things that you may have in common with your local area. So defining your communities. Communities of interest can be described by creating, communities of interest can be described by creating maps and telling us about your community. While there's no clear rules on how to define a community of interest, the following are ways in which you can help us define where your community is. So you can provide oral testimony. So personal stories are extremely powerful for this. You can share examples of things members of your community have in common and what makes your community unique. Written testimony. A written description can be used to tell your community's story as well. You can describe what connects the people and why it's important that they be kept together during redistricting. Community issues. So communities often get involved in redistricting because they feel their issues have not been adequately addressed by their elected representatives. Highlighting community issues in personal stories and written narratives help demonstrate the importance of having elected officials who understand and respond to community needs. Boundary maps. Creating a map of your neighborhood or area is also extremely helpful. You can mark the street names and significant locations. You can include significant landmarks and gathering places, including social service agencies, community centers, shopping districts, schools, and religious places. It may also be helpful to have or create a name for your community area to be a reminder about how and what makes your community unique. You can use both the electronic or the paper community of interest tool, which I will go into in a bit. So how can you participate in the process? First, we're asking folks to describe their community. Second, drawing your community on a map. And third, sending in your testimony directly to the commission. How can you do this? There are many different ways that we have determined that folks can reach out to the commission directly. The first, which is a very new tool this time around, is called the Community of Interest Mapping Tool. It can be found at drawmycacommunity.org. This tool is sort of like a Google Maps where users can go in and directly draw on a map where your community lies, as well as include a narrative and click submit, and it will go directly to the commission. We are also in the process of developing an analog version of the Community of Interest tool with a prepaid postage, which we will be reaching out to disperse amongst all of our community partners and far and wide across California for those who may not have readily and reliable access to the internet or broadband. We have lots of information on our website. We have the link to the Communities of Interest tool on our website as well. Folks can email votersfirst@crc.ca.gov with their input. You can call. If no one answers the phone, you can leave a message. You can also send in mail to our headquarters, which is our offices in Sacramento as well, with your input. A note to include is that the Community of Interest tool is available in a variety of different languages, and we've also made an effort to include tutorials in those languages as well, so we can reach as many folks as possible. Language access. So this is something that is very important to the commissioners. We have taken several steps to ensure more Californians will be able to participate in the process. We're translating materials. We have all of our fact sheets, or we will have all of our fact sheets, flyers, FAQs, redistricting basics presentations, such as the one I'm giving right now, in English, Spanish, simplified Chinese, traditional Chinese, Vietnamese, Tagalog, Korean, Armenian, Farsi, Arabic, Russian, Japanese, Punjabi, and Khmer. We may also be providing interpretation services for the public comment sections of our business meetings if we're provided with an advance notice. Written public input can be sent to the CRC, the commission, in any format and language, and will be translated into English prior to reaching the commissioners, and also be posted on our website. If you need an interpreter to provide input during a meeting, we do ask that you notify the commission 5 business days prior to the meeting to request interpreter services. The commission will do its absolute best to contract with an interpreter in the requested language. So now jumping into the timeline, this is where things get a little icky. So the legislature had the foresight last year, ahead of the seating of the commission, to request an extension for our deadline. Originally, the commission's deadline to deliver maps was August 15th, 2021. However, the legislature had the foresight to see that there would potentially be census delays that would impact our work. The California Supreme Court ruled that the commission's final maps would be due December 15th, 2021, in the case that there are delays in receiving census data. Now we are in the situation where we know that there are delays with receiving census data. The US Census Bureau has announced the date to deliver to states as September 30th. They have also stated that they would potentially be releasing legacy formatted data to the states by sometime in the middle of August or the end of August. Now, given that we are still uncertain when we would receive the census data, we have done our best to draft out a rough timeline of how this redistricting process will pan out. So currently we are in the educational presentations phase, where we're trying to reach as many community groups as possible to give these educational presentations, to share where folks can give their input, to share information about our meetings, what we're covering, what different items we have covered in our open public meetings, as well as how to get involved. From June to August, we have slated public input meetings. And these are the meetings in which we hope to have Californians come in and give their input about where their communities are. This current climate of COVID-19 has restricted our ability to hold in-person meetings. So we are currently in the works of creating a hybrid model in the case that we will have the opportunity to go out there in person. And this hybrid model is a living, breathing document, as you all are probably very well aware, as the COVID-19 pandemic situation changes on the daily. Restrictions and guidance is changing daily. The vaccine rollout has changed the trajectory quite a bit. So we as a commission are very aware of the changes that may be coming, and we hope that everyone who's following along in the redistricting process is also keeping tabs with us on how our input process may change moving forward. August 15th to August 30th is when we are expecting the legacy census data to the states. California has the ability to format this legacy data into the census, the traditional US Census data format. And this would be led by the statewide database out of UC Berkeley. So we are expecting, if we go with that timeline, we are expecting the data to come to the commission by the end of September or the end of October. So within that 1 month time period. From October to December, we hope that we will continue to have those public input meetings and then start to hold our line drawing sessions. So this is the pre-district maps. Sometime between November and December in the holidays. We're hoping everyone will join us during the holidays to discuss redistricting. We hope to release draft district maps. After these draft district maps are released, the commission has to remove their hands from these drafts and allow the community to give their input and feedback on these maps for, I believe it's a two-week time period. After that, we take in that input that we receive and we continue to refine these maps given the input. And then we are hoping to submit the district maps sometime between December and February of next year. All of this, I want to add a disclaimer with an asterisk with continue to watch our public input meetings because this timeline is constantly shifting. Unlike the prior redistricting process in 2010, where there was no pandemic, where there was no delay in census data being released, this timeline is constantly changing. You know, one meeting we were under the assumption we wouldn't get the census data until Halloween. Legislation from other states against the US Census Bureau resulted in, you know, the announcement that they would release legacy data. So we just had a meeting 2 weeks ago with stakeholders across the state who would be impacted by redistricting. So not just the commission, but election offices across the different counties who actually have to plan and coordinate for elections. We had representatives from the state legislature who would be impacted. We had other entities who are relying on census data and these maps to be released and finalized for their work to move forward as well. So this timeline is ever changing. So I really encourage everyone to follow along in this process. Just a quick reminder before we jump into Q&A. Again, I can't take any public input regarding the redistricting matter, but I'm here to answer any questions about the process and anything else I've covered in the presentation. However, you don't have to wait until public input hearings to provide your feedback. You can go to our website, redrawthelinesca.org. And our tool is live there. Our information to reach the commission is live. I just can't take input directly in this meeting, but you are more than welcome to provide your input through that channel right now. And then if you have other folks who are interested in an informational session, please do contact our team members. Patricia is really leading the effort in keeping us organized in this effort of reaching out to different organizations and communities to provide these informational sessions. We are also now live on a variety of different social media outlets. We have our Instagram page, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, as well as YouTube, where we do post recordings of our meetings as well from the past. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and
Hi, everybody. Maria Mead here. I am going to read off some of these great questions and we'll hopefully be able to get to all of them. If you haven't yet had a chance to ask a question and you want to place it in the chat, that would be great. And we'll try to get to all of your questions. So we'll start with the first one. What is the meaning of legacy data?
Good question. So this is new. We had, the experts, the leading experts at Statewide Database also, bring that forward in our previous open meeting, which I encourage you all to go back and watch. From my understanding, legacy data is the same exact data that would be released later on in the year by the US Census Bureau. It's just not in the traditional format that the US Census Bureau releases their data in. That was a concern with the commission, that are we going to potentially be working off of a different data set than what the US Census Bureau would release at the end of September? The answer is no. It is the exact same data. it would just not have been formatted in the traditional US Census Bureau format. The press release the US Census Bureau released on March 15th acknowledged that not all states would have the capabilities to format this legacy data into the format we need for our redistricting purposes. However, we are California, and we do have a variety of talent across the state to do this correction and or formatting for that legacy data.
Wonderful, thank you. Next question, who does the redistricting for local offices such as the county and city?
So that's a really good question. And that varies across California. So I would encourage you to check with your local county or city. So for example, the county that I live in, which is Santa Clara County, they just covered this in one of their board meetings where they are considering an advisory commission, not necessarily a fully independent commission, but an advisory commission. Other counties might hold that process fully in-house. And then there's, counties such as San Francisco, which has an independent commission, or Sacramento, which has an independent commission. So it really does vary across city and county across California.
Wonderful, thank you. How reliable does the commission feel the census data is at this time? And were all of the Californians counted?
That's a really great question. I have not seen the census data yet, so I'm not sure how I, confident I am in commenting on that piece exactly. However, I do recognize that, the census was unprecedented. We had, at least in California, we had the COVID-19 pandemic. We also had our wildfires going on at the same time. And, many communities got displaced, and follow-up for the census was difficult. And, with my other hat, just watching the census play out within the county, it was definitely a large feat. However, California being as awesome as we are, we had an amazing response with the census. I'm excited to see what the census data will look like, and I'm sure everyone will be just as excited as I am once the Census Bureau releases that data and we can actually all dive into it.
Thank you. Another question, how engaged is the average California resident in this process? And then they go on to say, seems like most folks are not aware of this important work. And is public input welcomed from all residents or only citizens?
These are great questions. I'm loving it. So how engaged is the average Californian in this process? I don't know. I feel like from my perspective, at least in my circles, folks are not even aware that redistricting is happening. When I shared that, hey, I'm doing this thing, they're just like, what is that? And it's, a new process in California to be held with the people, right? This is only the second time that it's happened. So I expect, as the decades go on and as we continue to engage Californians to lead this effort, folks will become more and more aware of it. There has been some national attention on redistricting with HR 1 moving through the federal government as well. So there's starting to become an awareness for this process. In terms of California and public input is welcomed from every single human in California, regardless of citizenship status. And that is a very unique part of the redistricting process, unlike some of our other civic engagement opportunities. Redistricting is really about people and where the people are. So we welcome feedback and input from everyone who lives in California.
Wonderful. Another question, this is got a few layers to it. Are you familiar with the math used to determine the degree of redistricting imbalance? How will you be applying it to proposed maps to see if there is not some inadvertent imbalances?
That's a good question. So there's been conversations about, how we can sort of, automate the process of redistricting. And this is, something that is in its very early stages in infancy of how we can use, machine learning or AI technology to try to see how we can, advance redistricting to a very fine level. However, I don't think we are there yet in terms of the math used for redistricting. We have certain legislation that we are under. So the Voters First Act, which outlines Voters First Act, as well as the Voting Rights Act, I should say, which outlines roughly the balance of at least federal congressional districts, how many people should be within those districts. We do have guidance on, plus or minus 10% difference between the largest district and the smallest district across California. We will be working with our line drawers, which we recently just contracted with and hired, which is Q2 and Haystack DNA. They will be our official line drawers to help us assist in this process to get to that nitty-gritty detail once we start that process.
And we have another question here. Why isn't Santa Cruz considered more affiliated with San Jose? We are much more tightly connected with San Jose. I guess it's more of a partly a comment and partly a question.
I guess I would ask in what sense. I guess the only map that I had presented was the breakdown of the outreach map. And that's not necessarily saying that, one county is different than another. It was just a way for us commissioners to manage the outreach process. But as of yet, in terms of districting itself, we haven't gotten there yet. So if that is, something that Bruce would like to provide public input on, our website is wedrawthelineca.org, and I welcome that input.
Great. And then the same person said, employment distance and both, I guess in terms of us in San Jose, we're not considered part of the 9-county SF Bay area.
Yeah, I'm not sure how directly that would relate to the process of redistricting at this stage. However, that's a good point. And, with COVID-19 being on the national scale and Bay Area being on the scale, I've seen that to myself of, Bay Area counties, whatever that means. But for the purposes of redistricting, this is good input to provide to the commission.
And then the same person just commented that the math was used in a presentation to SCOTUS for the Supreme Court.
I am not familiar with that one.
Great. Well, I think those are all of our questions and comments. This was very interesting. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me. I really enjoyed speaking with you all.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Ahmad. We really, really appreciate it. We appreciate all of you who showed up today. And please stick around because we have some announcements about some activities and actions that are happening right away, actually. And I will let Jane explain a little bit about the first one.